The ladies are gonna like that fast. So the reel I'm using here, this is the new Daiwa Tatula, the 2020, the one that just came out. It's based off of the closest thing I could say is like the Steez SV TW frame. So it palms better than the one that came out in 2017. Definitely palms better than that one. Casting wise, I'd have to say it's more. Well, I might have something following. Yep, I did. I saw that. Casting wise, oh, that's a better one. Casting wise, I'd say it's better than. It's definitely better than the 2017. It's more of like I'd say your traditional Daiwa Mag Force. You can still tell that it's an SV reel because it does have a little bit choked off distance. You're not going to get a huge amount of distance, but it's still a fishable distance. Now if you're fishing deep crankbaits or swim baits, I'd probably opt for a different braking system. But for this buzz bait, for jigs, Senkos, all that kind of stuff, this reel casts all those baits, and also it casts them far enough. Yeah, if you haven't thought it was odd enough, fishing a buzz bait, it's one of my favorite ways to fish for bass. You used to hear about it all the time, like, you know, the old Bill Dance days and stuff like that. But really, like nowadays, people just kind of jumped onto the chatterbait, which is it's a good lure, and I think for a good all-around lure, if I was just gonna pick one lure, that would probably be it. But I just love fishing a buzz bait. This is actually a more limber rod. This is a Abu Garcia Veritas. This is of their cranks, their winch series. So basically, it's like their crankbait rod, and this is some fluorocarbon, 12-pound fluorocarbon line I have on here. So make sure that drag is maxed. If you see anything casted out there, just keep it up. And what that's going to do is it's going to give that fish more of a shock to be able to grab the lure, so it can get it better in its mouth. Especially, like, I don't know, that got to be like a foot of water over there. So when they come in storming and hitting it, they might get it like right in the front of their mouth. And then with the stiffer rod and that braid, you're not going to have any sort of give to that system. Now, if I was in there we go. If I was around a lot of cover, I'd want to use the braid, because the braid's going to cut through. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's a battle scar one. Oh, good. So the retrieve on the Tatula, it's not like buttery smooth. I have not taken this reel apart yet to, you know, usually I put different grease in and all that kind of good stuff. But it's definitely, it's connected, and it's pretty smooth. I'm not saying it's super smooth, but it's not distracting. Like sometimes you get some reels that they just feel like coffee grinders when you're reeling them in, and you can't really feel what's going on. I have none of that issue with the Tatula. And this is the 7.1 to 1 gear ratio. If I was strictly going to use it for buzzbaits, I'd probably get the 8 to 1. But this 7 to 1, it's still fast enough. I can fish these buzzbaits. It keeps me on pace pretty well. So what I got here in front of me, see there's some logs up there and some shrub. This is all really shallow up here. So I'm just gonna rip out a really long cast. I already fished some of the closer stuff. Generally, I would start with a little bit shorter cast. That way I'm not gonna be spooking all those. I'm not gonna hook up with a fish at the end of the cast and then drag it all the way through these other fish. Give it a little change of direction outside the fish's line of sight. A little pause, and then just repeat. It's an excellent way to cover water in these and right around the spawn, because you got the bluegill that are up shallow spawning, doing their thing. And I don't know if this imitates that, but it seems I always catch fish around that same time with the buzzbait. I'd say with the flatter trajectory of the cast, like with this one compared to like the 2017. I feel I can be a lot more accurate, which is pretty important when you buzzbait. Oh, that was a little too far. It's pretty important when you're buzzbait fishing. There we go. Oh, that's a nice one. Just because you can get right up next to the shoreline. Oh, there, he got off. It's like right up next to the shoreline I like to hit. Even if I do land up on the shoreline, it's not a big deal. I keep overshooting a little bit. I'm not quite used to it, but let me hit some cover that's up in front real quick. There's right up on the grass, especially if it's a real small grass like that. I like to cast right up by the grass, close as I can get it. And then that way, like the splashdown, if you think about it as like a little, I don't know how. Oh, here we go. If you think of it as like a little area, like a blast radius, if it's right up next to the shoreline, it's going to create a lot less disturbance, and it's going to be a little bit more natural, like as a bluegill that's coming up after some bluegill that's coming up after like a cricket or something that's in the water or whatever. That's where I always find buzzbaits to be more effective. Let's see. Yeah, I mean I could go for days back there, but I'm gonna head up this other shoreline. It's getting a little bit dark, so I gotta make my way back to the boat launch. Oh, frogs too. And one thing that's been kind of nice is with the new grips, they're kind of like, they're not the big, they're called paddle knobs. They're not like overly huge by any means, but like they have like the little Daiwa D. Actually, this is the Tatula CT right here. Like those knobs, a little bit different. I went over in a different video, kind of some of the cosmetic differences. But the knobs are definitely grippy out on the water. Sometimes knobs will feel real grippy until like, they get wet, and then they don't really work out all that well. So these knobs are actually, they're really grippy. It's been raining kind of on and off here today, and I haven't had any sort of problems with the grips at all. I mean, under like load, the gears actually feel really nice. They're brass gears, which I generally prefer for any of this heavy cover stuff. But they have no issues when I was reeling those fish in, especially on the buzzbait. You're really ripping those fish back. It's not like you're fishing a wacky rig or anything like that where you can play the fish back. Your drag's locked down and you're just ripping them back in. I can't really speak on the drag so far. Fishing a buzzbait, it's kind of hard to talk about the drag, but everything else with the reel has worked pretty much as expected or a little bit better. Like I've used the Daiwa Stees, some Aldebaran, Antares, a bunch of high-end reels. I'd say this reel is it's probably a good 90% of those reels. Like it can be a little bit smoother, they cast a little bit farther, they might be a little bit lighter. But for doing like heavy work like this, I mean not like huge swim baits or anything, but like your buzz baits, spinner baits, all that kind of stuff. I mean the new Tatula SV has just been, oops, the wind kind of blew that around the tree. But this Tatula has actually been pretty good. Better. Oh, there we go. Oh, come on. Slapping mosquitoes off my neck. But the Tatula has actually been better than I expected. I kind of had high expectations for it because when I reviewed the 2017 version, I was like, hey, this actually ain't too bad of a reel. And then this one's definitely, there we go. It's definitely better, I think, in pretty much every way, unless like you have a preference with knobs, or you just like the little bit bigger frame. Because some people don't like small frames if they have really big hands. So that's really the only difference. Like performance wise, I'd say the only pro that the 2017 has, ooh, that was right in his meat. The only pro that the 2017 has is that it has a little bit more control. But this version right here definitely gets more distance. I don't even think that people can argue that. So I know when I initially unboxed the reel, I kind of said it didn't really feel all that dry, I mean all that good or anything, but it actually hasn't been all that bad. It seems like the grease, whatever grease was in there or whatever, is kind of breaking itself in. I don't know what I would call it, but it's not distracting at all. So if you're looking to get a reel, a kind of a good all-around workhorse reel, if you're a beginner, it's still a really good reel. Even say if you're more on the enthusiast level and you buy the higher end stuff, if you're looking for just your workhorse reel, it's like, hey, I need a reel to throw buzz baits or spinner baits or just something that you just want to try out and don't invest much. Right here, the Daiwa Tatula, I'd say it's a real winner. Even this is like kind of the first time I really got to fish it hard, and I'd say for sure, like I don't really see. Oh, come on, there's something. It hit when I was thinking. I really don't see the need if you're gonna have kind of like a niche setup that you don't want to dump a lot of money into, kind of like this one I have here. It's perfect, and if you want to move it around for jigs or for whatever you have, it's a versatile enough reel. It can cast the crankbaits just fine. It can cast the jigs, all that kind of good stuff. It comes in 3 different gear ratios: the 6.3, the 7.1, and the 8.1. So it can cover a lot of your bases. Whatever you're looking to do, there's going to be a Tatula for it. You should check it out. We'll be tearing this reel apart to see the insides and be able to show you guys a little bit of maintenance tips on how to maintain your reel, so that way you don't have to go buying new ones every time it turns into a coffee grinder.